The power of belief. There was a man who spent years trying to change his life. He worked harder. He learned new skills. He searched for opportunities. But no matter what he did, something always stopped him. It wasn't a lack of intelligence. It wasn't a lack of opportunity. It wasn't even a lack of effort. The thing holding him back was something he couldn't see. A belief. For years, he believed he wasn't good enough. He believed successful people were different. He believed some dreams were simply not meant for people like him. And slowly, those beliefs became his reality. But what if the things you believe about yourself are not the truth? What if the limits you see were created inside your own mind? Because before you can change your life, you must first change the person you believe you are. Chapter 1. The prison inside his mind. David was not a lazy person. He was not someone who gave up easily. In fact, he tried harder than most people around him. He watched videos. He read books. He looked for ways to improve his life. But every time he got close to changing something, he found a reason to stop. David had dreams. He wanted to become someone he could be proud of. He wanted to speak English confidently. He wanted to build something meaningful. He wanted to create a better future. But there was a problem. Every time he imagined himself achieving those things, a voice inside his mind appeared. You are not ready. You are not talented enough. People like you don't succeed. At first, David didn't realize how powerful those words were. He thought they were just thoughts, just moments of doubt. But the truth was different. Those thoughts were slowly becoming beliefs. And beliefs are dangerous. Because they don't just influence what you think. They influence what you do. David started avoiding situations where he could fail. When he wanted to learn something new, he waited for the perfect moment. When he wanted to start a project, he convinced himself he needed more preparation. When he saw someone else succeed, he didn't think, maybe I can do that too. Instead, he thought, they are different from me. The strange thing was, nobody had ever told David that he couldn't succeed. Nobody had locked him in a prison. Nobody had taken away his opportunities. The prison was invisible, but it was real. It was built from every negative thought he repeated, every failure he remembered, every comparison he made. Every time he chose fear over action. One evening, David was sitting alone in his room. He opened his notebook and looked at a list of things he wanted to accomplish. At the top was written, the person I want to become. Underneath were his dreams. But next to every dream, there was an excuse. I don't have enough time. I'm not good enough. I'm probably going to fail. He looked at the page for a long time. And for the first time, he asked himself a different question. What if my biggest problem is not my ability? What if my biggest problem is what I believe about myself? That question stayed in his mind. Because maybe he was not failing because he was incapable. Maybe he was failing because he never allowed himself to truly try. For years, David had been searching for a way to change his life. But he was looking in the wrong place. He was looking at his circumstances, his situation, his limitations. But he had never looked at the thing controlling all of them. His beliefs. And that was the first thing David had to understand. A person who believes they cannot change will always find reasons to stay the same. Chapter 2. The belief that changed everything. For most of his life, David believed that confidence came before action. He thought successful people acted because they were confident. But he discovered something different. Confidence does not always come before action. Sometimes, confidence is created by action. After that night, David started paying attention to the thoughts inside his mind. For the first time, he noticed something important. Most of the limits he had accepted were never proven. They were only assumptions. He had spent years saying, I'm not good at this. But he had never truly tried. He had spent years saying, I can't change. But he had never given himself the chance to become different. So David decided to make a small change. Not a huge transformation. Not a promise that his entire life would become perfect overnight. Just one small decision. He would stop allowing his old beliefs to control his actions. The next morning, he woke up earlier. He studied for a few minutes. He practiced something he had avoided for years. It was uncomfortable. It was difficult. And his old thoughts immediately returned. This is pointless. You are wasting your time. You will never be good enough. But this time, David responded differently. Instead of believing the thought, he questioned it. Is this actually true? Or is this just a habit my mind created? Days passed, then weeks. Nothing dramatic happened. There was no magical moment where everything changed. But something invisible was happening. Every small action was creating evidence. Every time he practiced, he proved, maybe I am capable. Every time he continued after a mistake, he proved, maybe failure does not mean I should quit. Every time he faced discomfort, he proved, maybe I am stronger than I thought. David began to understand something powerful. A belief is not created only by what you say. A belief is created by what you repeatedly experience. If you constantly avoid challenges, your mind learns. I am someone who cannot do difficult things. But if you face challenges, even small ones, your mind learns. I am someone who can overcome difficult things. But changing a belief is never easy. Because the old version of yourself does not disappear quietly. One day, David decided to take a bigger step. He joined a conversation where he had to speak English. Before entering the room, his heart was beating fast. His hands were nervous, and that familiar voice returned, "Don't do this. You will embarrass yourself. Everyone will notice your mistakes." For a moment, David almost walked away. The old belief was fighting to survive. But then he remembered something. The goal was not to be perfect. The goal was to become someone who tries. So he entered the room. He made mistakes. He forgot words. He felt uncomfortable, but he stayed. And when it was over, something changed. Not because he was suddenly fluent. Not because everything became easy. But because he had just proven something to himself. The person he feared becoming was already inside him. He just needed to stop protecting the person he was trying to leave behind. That night, David wrote something in his notebook. I don't need to believe I am already successful. I only need to believe I am capable of becoming better. And that was the moment everything started changing. Because the most powerful beliefs are not the ones that say, I already have everything. The most powerful beliefs are the ones that say, I can become someone different. Chapter 3. The person he believed he could become. Changing a belief is not difficult because the new belief is impossible. It is difficult because the old belief feels familiar. Even when it hurts us, we often choose what we know over what we could become. Months had passed since David decided to challenge the way he saw himself. His life was not perfect. He still had difficult days. He still made mistakes. He still had moments where fear tried to control him. But something was different. David was no longer the same person who avoided every challenge. Because now, he had proof. Proof that he could learn. Proof that he could improve. Proof that he could continue even when things were uncomfortable. Before, every failure felt like a final answer. A mistake meant, I am not good enough. A rejection meant, I was never meant to succeed. A difficult moment meant, I should give up. But now, David saw failure differently. A mistake was no longer evidence that he was weak. It was evidence that he was growing. One day, David faced one of his biggest challenges. He had an opportunity to present something he had been working on for months. The old David would have found an excuse. He would have said, maybe someone else should do it. But this time, he accepted the challenge. Before the presentation started, the fear came back. The same thoughts, the same doubts, the same voice. What if you fail? What if people judge you? What if you are not ready? For a moment, David stood there remembering the person he used to be. The person who always waited. The person who always doubted. The person who believed success was for other people. Then he realized something important. The goal was never to remove fear. The goal was to stop letting fear decide his future. So he took a deep breath and started. It was not perfect. He made mistakes. There were moments where he struggled, but he finished. And when he looked back, he understood something. The biggest victory was not the presentation. The biggest victory was the person he had become while preparing for it. David finally understood the power of belief. Your beliefs do not magically create success. They create the person who takes action. They decide whether you try one more time, whether you continue after failure, whether you see a challenge as a wall or as a path. For years, David thought he needed a different life. But what he really needed was a different belief about himself. Because the world around him had not changed first. He had changed first. And then, everything else started to follow. The truth is, every person carries invisible beliefs. Some beliefs push us forward. Others quietly keep us trapped. And the dangerous thing about a limiting belief is that it does not feel like a prison. It feels like reality. So ask yourself, what have I been believing about myself that may not actually be true? Maybe you are not too late. Maybe you are not incapable. Maybe you are not as far away from your goals as you think. Maybe the first step is not changing your circumstances. Maybe the first step is changing the way you see yourself. Because the person you become tomorrow begins with the belief you choose today.